Adam Clark.
Yes.
And Adam is with the city of Concord. They do single stream recycling.
That's me.
Adam, nice to meet you. John Swan with Save Forest Lake.
How you doing, John?
Good, how you doing?
We're great.
We're trying to stop a nefarious landfill project next to Forest Lake State Park, so.
Yeah, I saw your shirt.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably more than enough.
Hey Reagan, how are you?
Good, nice to see you.
Representative Evil.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
Reagan.
Morning.
Good.
Exactly, it's been very convenient. Very appreciative of those who drove an hour more to get here. Sunny this morning, but beautiful.
You might say. You had a little bit of first. Some water. Station on the way in.
I think just went down the hall.
My phone is whenever I leave these rooms, I don't know.
Press it off, so I don't need it comes.
I actually always, I was like, I would rather leave the girl with Hazen Drive Room, so I can phone and make sure.
So where'd you get all that bio? Did you get that? Was that from you? What I posted? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted the link so people can kind of see who's who. Get people more involved. Nice.
Certain items we purpose right.
How about my laptop? I don't print things.
Lebanon. Yeah, Lebanon is pretty cool.
Oh, right, yeah.
We saw it a couple of years ago.
They're doing food waste, composting at the Lebanon Landfill. It's Ronald Scott, the commissioner for DES.
And you know what the problem is with the way that things were done before.
It's Ronald Scott.
You know, so
And
small.
Mike Grimseth's the director on the left. So Robert Scott, Mike Grimseth, director for solid waste, commissioner. This is Coca-Cola coming in.
Morning. Hi. Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Good morning, Commissioner.
How are you? Thanks for.
Good to see you.
Thanks for volunteering. How are you? Glad to see you again.
Yeah, exactly.
Be good to see you. Yeah, I don't get to sit on any of the all on the files.
Oh,
So I don't get the fun stuff.
you're conflicted out.
Just try to get off one. There's a little suspicion. But it's, you know, I think when we hear about these rules and asking questions about that is kind of fun.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we had that. Yeah.
That's Senator Gray.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's fine. He's fine.
Both sides, so I don't know what I'm
Oh, my sister. Hi, Senator, how are you? They're back here.
Name tags?
Oh. Look in the other direction. Thank you.
Mike Norton.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Finally get you
Yeah,
guys
thank
today.
you.
So that's where the next line will come in and it shows choose the best option. And what I do.
Oh my gosh, I saw your name on the list. It's great to meet you in person. Yes. I know. That's okay. Yes, I know. Okay. No, I was excited to see you on there. So I know we need to be talking more.
And animal slaughter.
And animal slaughter. You're a
Hazen Airport.
Oversight and all the
Yep. I even brought like props. I brought some of our 100% PET bottles and stuff. It's a lot. But
Actually, Pearl, he's the chair of the
that's cool.
water one.
Yeah, great.
Can't forget that one.
So it's gonna be, it's like, I was hiding.
No hiding.
What's that?
Hi, Susanna. I've heard your name. I brought gifts for you. No, you brought gifts? Well, following up on a conversation you had with Adam, nice to meet you. I guess you guys are talking about our 100% recycled bottles, so samples to show you, but I think you guys were talking about the color. How are you?
President Morrison, good to see you.
That's not totally not necessary.
Did you get a chance to say hi to Senator Avard?
He would not engage. I saw him walk by, try to get engaged. I did get Bradley for like 10 minutes. I couldn't, on the way in, they were like avoiding us like the way. But on the way out, I said, Senator Bradley. And he finally turned and he came over and I had a reasonable conversation.
Oh, you're outdoorsman.
You know, for a fundraiser, they only probably had, it seemed like only like maybe 20 or 25 people. It wasn't like a huge, but it was a weird place. They were having it at a billiards and a casino place. So it's like, you know, all these rough-looking guys going in with cue sticks and stuff. They came over and looked at our sign and wanted to know what the deal was. Politicians are all going like, you know, but it was definitely worthwhile. We got some good conversation. I had cards from a couple of lobbyists that we might, you know, that said what's going on. And pretty soon they knew it was about Dalton and all that. So it's good.
Well, thanks for doing that. You're missing 4 people so far. You're missing 4 people.
So the marshals are the whole lane, right?
Yes.
Kelly Carbonite, so
Good, how are you? That's good. So.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike Wimstat. I serve as Director of the Waste Management Division for New Hampshire DES. Also, the Commissioner's designee to this working group, and I'm happy to kind of call to order this first organizational meeting of the Solid Waste Working Group pursuant to House Bill 413. The meeting's hosted by DES here as a hybrid meeting, so on the GoToWebinar platform we do have one member, all the members are here except for one in person, and that's
I just want to welcome you and thank you for the volunteering for the work. We actually had a lot of volunteers for the board, and frankly, we were worried about having a quorum, because as you probably read 91A says, you have to have a physical quorum. We are committed to trying to make as much as possible hybrid so we can be more publicly accessible, but thankfully we didn't have to worry about a quorum, so this is great, to the extent you need to vote. So I really wanted to thank you in advance for your time. Thank you for volunteering. Obviously it's a public meeting, so depending on the topic, my guess is you'll see the public here also, which is very appropriate. For the building, as you know, if you go down the halls, there's bathrooms, men's and women's, depending on which side, if you need anything. And again, we have staff here to help you should you need anything else. So with that, I'll let you do your work, but I just really again want to thank you, and I'll thank the legislators here also, Senator Gray, Representative Pearl, and Ebel, for establishing this. So I think this will help inform the department and move the state along on these issues. So thank you very much. Welcome. You didn't miss anything yet, so nothing important anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I also want to recognize Dr. Watson, one of our members who arrived, and we have some members of the public here, so please feel free to find a seat and so I want to thank Tara Albert, who is hosting this, helping us host this remotely on the GoToWebinar platform. And I want to just pause if there's any communications you'd like to make with the group or with the folks participating remotely. I will give you an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Good morning. Those of you who are online, I just want to give you a couple of visuals here. So the solid waste working group members who are attending virtually will be asked to speak and show, or be able to speak and show their cameras. So Lynn, if you could unmute really quickly, just let us know if you can hear us and see.
I can. In fact, I'm the only laggard, so thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lynn. And she is the only one that I see that is online that is a member of the group. Also, attendees from the public. You may type questions into the question box as they come up. They will be collected for review. And then if anyone has any troubleshooting, those are online, please use the email below at tara.m.albert@des.nh.gov. And for the subject line, it would be helpful for me if you would just put software issues for SW meeting. That way I'll catch that before anything else that comes in on my email. And then mostly we have audio issues, so everything I just said may not have been heard by those that are online. So this here, you want to choose your best audio option. And there is a way to call in, and you would click it here. So that really is all that I wanted to put on the screen now, and I'm going to share the agenda, so that will be up on the screen. Okay, so the agenda is up, and then our video is up, so, and we are recording.
Thank you, Tara, very much. Yes, and as Tara indicated, this meeting is being recorded on GoToWebinar platform, so it'll be available for review at a later date. I would also just note as a courtesy, there is a member of the public here participating who is recording the meeting using their own equipment. So in addition to the working group members, we also have a number of members of the public here who are participating. I want to welcome all the group members as well as the members of the public to this meeting. quickest way out is through this door here to the right. And if you go out to the right, there's a stairwell that goes right down and out one of the entrances to the building. And if that happens, obviously members of the staff here will help direct you where you need to go. So I think maybe the first order of business is that we let this august group of folks introduce themselves. And I've introduced myself, so I think I'll go to my right. And then I think if you could just say your name, your affiliation, and particularly what group you represent here in the context of this solid waste working group. That would be helpful for getting to know your fellow group members. Representative Pearl.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Representative Howard Pearl. I am the chair of the Environment and Agriculture Committee. We were responsible for getting House Bill 413 through the House. So I am the designee from the Speaker of the House to represent the Hampshire House here. Good to meet you all.
Hi everyone, I'm Jim Malley. I'm with the University of New Hampshire, I guess the university system representative, and I teach solid and hazardous waste, so nice to know you all.
Good morning, my name is Steve Podgy. I'm the Director of Disposal Operations for Waste Management in New England and New York State. I'm involved in solid waste management activities for the state of New Hampshire for probably about 37 years. And I'm here representing industry that operates landfill and recycling facilities.
Brian Patno, here representing the town of Lancaster for the rural source separated town.
Mark Morgan, I'm the solid waste manager for the city of Lebanon, representing publicly owned operated landfills.
I'm Adam Clark, Administration Division Manager for the City of Concord, and I'm here representing cities that have single stream recycling programs.
Eric Steinhauser, I'm on the New Hampshire's Waste Management Council, so I'm a representative from there. Representing the professional engineers during the day. I work for a local firm called Sanborn Head and Associates. I've been involved in solid waste engineering from landfills for transfer stations, MRFs, from Maine to Virginia, Ohio, Alabama, California for about 30 years.
I'm Reagan Bissonnette. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Resource Recovery Association and representing that organization on this group. We help communities in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts with their recycling. And in particular in New Hampshire, over 80% of towns and cities are members of our organization.
My name is Representative Karen Evil, and I'm here as the former chair of the HB 617 Recycling and Solid Waste Study Committee. We've sort of birthed HB 413 and a lot of other pieces of legislation that I introduced, and I'm just here to help lend context to the whole process that we've been through the last couple of years.
My name is Freya Paris. I'm the Manager of Environmental Services for Elliott Hospital. I oversee all of the waste programs there, the solid waste, recycling, general infectious, as well as hazardous waste. And I'm here representing the healthcare sector.
Hi there, I'm Jim Gray. I'm a state senator from District 6. I'm a member of the Energy and National Resource Committee in the Senate, and because there is someone here from one of the university system, I want to make sure that I disclose that I am the Senate rep to the University System Board of Trustees. Although I am not representing them on this board, I just want to make sure that it's disclosed.
Good morning. My name is Susanna Smith. I'm with Coca-Cola Beverages Northeast. We're Coca-Cola bottler. We're based in Bedford. We have a production facility in Londonderry. And I am here representing companies that reprocess post-consumer waste into products for sale or reuse.
Good morning, Duncan Watson. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director for the City of Keene. I'm actually not sure who I'm representing other than trying to change the status quo of what we're doing currently to something better.
Hi, I'm Colin Kelly. I work for Schnitzer Steel Industries, and I'm here representing the scrap metal industry, as well as serving as the executive committee member for the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries, which represents paper, plastic, scrap metal, tires, and so on. Thank you.
environmental manager with Wind and Waste Innovations. I'm here representing the waste to energy part of the business up through our facility in Concord, the Woodbury Concord facility. Let Lynn introduce herself.
Yep. Lynn, you can go ahead and unmute.
Great, thanks. Lynn Rubenstein, Executive Director of the Northeast Recycling Council, also known as NERC. And I'm really delighted to be able to be part of this panel. We are a regional nonprofit. We do 11 states, which includes New Hampshire. And we have a focus that includes recycling market development. And I believe it's specifically because of that we were invited to participate. So thanks.
Well, thank you, everyone. This is such an impressive group of folks representing really so many of the interests surrounding solid waste management in our state. Before we go on, I also want to recognize someone who's not a member of the working group, but who's going to be a key person that you'll get to know. Mike Nort, who's sitting in the back of the room, has organized this meeting. He's the newly selected administrator of our materials management, education, and planning section. And he's really going to be a key leader in renewing and rejuvenating our planning efforts and working with this group. So just want to thank Mike and recognize him and to know who Mike is. So before we move to the second item on the agenda, I'd like to say just a few words about DES and its role on the working group. So as I indicated, I am the commissioner's designee of this working group. I expect to participate just as any other member would. But having said that, under the bill that established the working group, DES is required to convene this meeting, and we're doing that today. And we anticipate continuing to provide administrative support to the group throughout its tenure, its 5-year tenure. But having said that, we view this working group really as a self-directed, autonomous group of volunteers who've been brought together to really have a vital charge in assisting the state in conducting its solid waste planning efforts. And to that end, DES does not anticipate directing the group's activities or leading the group really in any way. We see that as you're going to be electing the chair later, and we see that as the group will be self-directed. And really what we're looking forward to, and as the statute anticipates, in providing a lot of guidance and input to the department as we undertake our planning efforts. So I just want to make it clear that that's how we view our role here. And again, I'm serving temporarily as a facilitator for the meeting, but that will change once we have a chair. So as every member of this group is aware of the importance of safe solid waste management in the state, and the significant challenges that we have had in conducting our planning efforts over time. And so in addition to creating this work group, House Bill 413 also directs DES to update the state solid waste plan by October 1 of 2022, which I would note is 11 short months away. So in addition to the other activities that I'm sure this group will engage in over its tenure, we see as a top priority the group really getting engaged in providing input to DES in the development of the plan. So with that, I want to recognize Karen Ebel, who we've already met, a member of the group here, to review House Bill 413. She was the principal sponsor and its provisions. So Representative Ebel.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you all so much for being here. I think it might be interesting to just look back a couple of years when, speaking for myself, I first got involved in this. You remember certain moments in your life, and I remember driving down 89 to some legislative meeting and listening to the radio and hearing for the umpteenth time, about the national sword policy from China, that municipalities were having a lot of trouble with their recycling and their solid waste. And I said, I don't know, this seems like a topic for a legislative study committee. And I thought, I have a feeling this is going to be a lot of work, but I think we need to do it. And so introduce the bill to create the committee, and to say that it really touched a chord within the state would be sort of an understatement, because it certainly has. We created the recycling committee. We started in August of 2019. We had 14 meetings in about 6 weeks. We had over 50 participants come and testify. Many of you sitting at this table were really invaluable in the information that you shared with the group. And so, so we produced the HB 617 final report that covered a lot of topics. Another thing I really remember, first hearing Mr. Wimsatt sitting down and saying, you know what would be really great is if we had some sort of a task force or something to help inform the department as it's developing its plans. And so that went into our recommendation. And 2 years later, after COVID, you know, here we are today, finally sitting here with our working group. So it's been a journey, and I know we have a journey ahead of us, but that's basically the history. And I do want to thank the Environment and Agricultural Committee for its unanimous support and for helping us get the bill through. So here we are. I think, I don't want to read to you, but I think it's really helpful to set some context for the bill. And in the beginning of the bill, the part that lots of times nobody reads, it says, for the purpose, the general court finds that proper solid waste management protects public health and the environment and preserves natural resources. To adequately prepare the state for future solid waste challenges, New Hampshire must review and update its solid waste management laws and policies and its solid waste management plan, engage in vigorous, and this is where we come in, long-range planning, and again, develop creative, effective solutions. And this is another point that we learned in the recycling committee. Other states in the region have devoted significant effort and funds to future solid waste management planning. New Hampshire lags behind in updating its solid waste reduction and recycling policies, while solid waste disposal capacity rapidly diminishes to the detriment and expense of the state's citizens, municipalities, and businesses. This working group is established to assist the Department of Environmental Services plan our solid waste future for the state. So that basically is where we are. Through the study committee process, we learned that the state, because of budget cutting, hadn't really had, and Mr. Morgan shared that. I mean, I remember this like a thunderbolt. Mr. Morgan said that he used to be very involved in planning at the Solid Waste Bureau, and that went away maybe 15 years ago. It's very hard to do long-range planning if you don't have a planning section. And Mr. Nork has now been promoted, so I'm happy to say we've made some progress there. The other thing we learned is that we hadn't updated our long-range solid waste plan since 2003. I think we now have a deadline in here that we have to stick with. And the other thing we learned is that our disposal reduction goals had goals that were supposed to be achieved by the year 2000, hadn't been achieved, and obviously that statute hadn't been updated for a very long time. And the last thing, you know, we learned many things, but another thing we learned is that there had been an impetus to revise our composting laws starting back in 2015, and we hadn't actually updated the composting laws yet. And I would say maybe the most well-attended hearing that we had was on composting. There's a huge amount of interest in composting in the state. So just turning to the bill, that sort of just gives you a background. The members who are here are members who we felt really represented important industries and interests in the state for going through the solid waste plan and supporting DES. And then on page 2 of the bill, line 19, you see all the different jobs that we have to do over the next 5 years. But I would say straight out of the gates, we are going to be working with DES on the long-range solid waste plan.
Representative Ebel, if I could just interrupt really quickly. We do have hard copies of HB 413 in the back here if anybody needs a copy. There are just probably 15 or 20 copies, so if anybody needs a copy. And also we have a copy of the HB 617 report printed out as well. So that's all I just wanted to say. Thank you.
So that was, so this HB 413, we established our working group with the goals and the, desires, that I have, described. We're supposed to have our initial report done November 30th, 2022, so, and then we have a 5-year term. The second thing that HB 413 did is, recognizing that the department is short-staffed, and always having to reprioritize, we decided composting was a significant enough issue that we wanted to put a deadline for the development of the regulations right in the bill. It's September 30th, 2021. Yes, that deadline has passed, but the bill wasn't actually signed into law until August, so you know, it's hard to really move ahead until a bill is signed, and I know Mr. North has made some progress, and he'll report to us on that. The other thing is that it revised the solid waste disposal reduction goal, and the numbers that are reflected here are numbers that were unanimously recommended by the recycling committee and then put into the bill. And that is that I won't go through all of it, but it's on page 3, starts on line 28. We have a goal to reduce solid waste disposed by 25% by the year 2030 and 45% by 2050. That doesn't mean we can't do more than that, but that is definitely our goal, and then there's definitions and exclusions within the body of the bill. And the other thing that really needed updating was just the dates and what would go into the state long-range solid waste plan. It came to our attention that there'd be the requirements for the plan basically didn't exist. So we decided that we would put some sort of definitions in there just to give the agency a little more guidance on what the legislature hoped to see embodied in the bill. I mean, in the long range goal. And I just want to say the entire bill did pass by unanimous consent in the House, in the Senate, and was signed by the governor. So there's a great deal of support for what is in this bill, at least at the state government level, from the context of the legislature and the governor. So I'll stop there. We have high hopes. Mike, you got your wish. You have a working group. And just, I guess what I'd like to do is turn this over to, I guess, Mr. North, and you can kind of talk about where you are as far as solid waste planning or anything else you'd like to say. And I think it'd be really helpful if you would update the group on where we are with the composting rules.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Ebel. So my position was just created maybe 3 weeks ago now. So we're really just kind of getting started on some of these issues in earnest. Although I wasn't technically in this position, I've been working on these issues for a number of years now, in addition to my other duties in the permitting section, which was my prior role at the department. So I've been working on the composting rules for quite a long time, basically since 2017, in fits and starts. And as Representative Ebel indicated, resource issues and shifting priorities kind of interfered with that project over the years. But with the HB 617 committee and the study, so the report and the recommendations, finding that composting was a huge priority for the state. It was always a priority for us. It was just difficult to manage it with the other competing priorities that we had. So after the committee put out their study report, and with the introduction of HB 413 and the deadline, we've been kind of working behind the scenes trying to prepare for that. So we do actually have a draft that was presented at the Waste Management Council on October 21st, and after that it goes to the Legislative Budget Assistance Office so that they can do a fiscal impact statement to assess the the potential fiscal impacts of the new rules. That is currently pending with the Legislative Budget Assistant. We expect that we'll be getting something back by the end of next week, which essentially officially kicks off the rulemaking process at that point. Once we get a fiscal impact statement, we're able to publish a rulemaking notice, we're able to schedule a public hearing. So that'll probably be happening within the next 1 to 2 months. We hope that we can do a hearing before Christmas and the holidays so that we don't have to interfere with folks being unavailable during the holiday season. Just a couple of pointers on the composting rules. There's a number of things that we're trying to do with the rulemaking, but we're trying to address a lot of feedback that we've received over the years, namely a lot of interest in meat and dairy composting. Folks that are interested in diverting food waste generally want to divert all their food waste. And the current rule structure only allows certain types of facilities to compost meat and dairy. There's basically 2 permit options for a composting facility in New Hampshire. There's a standard permit and a permit by notification. The permit by notification is the permit type that doesn't allow meat and dairy composting currently. And so we've received a lot of feedback from general public, from stakeholders in the composting industry, that is an impediment to developing further infrastructure in the state for diversion of food waste. So with this rulemaking, that's one of the primary goals, to allow meat and dairy composting under that permit type. We're hoping that that will open up, those that are interested in developing composting facilities. It'll make it more attractive for them to start those facilities so that we can develop more infrastructure across the state to address food waste diversion goals. So that is just kind of a very, there's more to it than that, but that's just kind of a very brief overview of the composting rules. So like I said, we're hoping that we'll have a public hearing for that scheduled within the next month or 2. As for solid waste management planning and the solid waste plan, that is by statute supposed to be updated. It was every 6 years. The Solid Waste Management Act has been amended by House Bill 413 to change that interval to every 10 years. And it's due November 2022, as I believe was referenced by both Mike Wimsatt and Representative Ebel. So our hope is that this group will be a venue for generating some ideas and getting some input on development of that plan. And we will be working with this group hopefully to provide some draft info, some outlines initially, maybe some actual sections of the plan or a draft plan, hopefully by early next year, that we can start working through and have something that the work group can provide feedback on. So that's kind of the general idea. But other than that, I also serve as kind of the legislative liaison for the Solid Waste Management Bureau, so I'm also right now kind of tracking a lot of solid waste legislation coming up for this next session. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now, and it's all kind of on a collision course, but it's definitely keeps us on our toes. So are there any questions from the working group on anything that I just mentioned? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you, Representative Ebel. And just not to add additional pressure, Mike, but it's actually October 1, so it just lost the month.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
So, well, thank you for that. And next on the agenda, I would like to accept any nominations for members to serve as chair of this working group. Do we have any nominations?
Mike, I've got some thoughts on that. I was thinking before the meeting about what criteria might be helpful for us in a chair because I, for one, want to make sure that my time is effectively used on this group. I think everyone wants to make sure we're really going to be productive, and of course the chair is an important piece of that. So I thought of 3 things for us to consider. One is I think it would be valuable for us to have someone as a chair who's already very familiar with the work of the HB 617 study committee, since that was an important foundation for this group's work. I think it would be helpful for us if we have a chair whose affiliation that they're representing here isn't going to have sort of direct financial ties to some of the possible recommendations coming out of this group, so that we can, have public confidence that the recommendations of this group, are sort of unbiased in that way, not tied to anyone's individual businesses here. And I also think, frankly, it could be helpful, since this group has such a long term, it would be helpful, I believe, for us to have a chair whose representation on this committee isn't tied to their, current business that they represent or affiliation. Meaning that, for example, if I'm no longer working at the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, then my organization would probably want to have a different representative on this group, which means that if I'm not at my organization in 4 years, we'd have to have a new chair. So with all of that in mind, I'd like to nominate Representative Ebel, because I believe that, given her extensive experience with the HB 617, being involved in developing the law that, is creating this group, as an elected official, she's not really representing any specific industry or group here. And my understanding is, based on the way that she is a member of this group, it's because of her prior involvement with the 617 study committee, and isn't really tied to her, term as an elected official. So that's my nomination for the group to consider.
Thank you very much. I'd like to second that nomination. For all the reasons I understand, I think Representative Eagle would be a great chair for me if she was so inclined. Okay, I have a second. Are there any further nominations? Seeing none, Representative Eagle, would you like to say anything on your behalf?
Just that I think about that trip I was taking down Route 89 when I decided to introduce the study committee. I'd really be honored to lead the group, and if that's the desire of the group, I'd do it. I have to say, through this experience, I just came to realize there's a lot of important issues, of course, but this issue affects every single person, every single entity, every single town in the state of New Hampshire. There's a lot of emotion associated with it. There's global considerations, state considerations, economics, climate change. It's just a really, really big issue, and it really came home to me during this process. So I think, yes, I'll do it if that's the will of the group, and I really appreciate all the support that I know that you'll give me along the way. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. So we have a nomination and a second, and apparently a willing candidate. So why don't we have a voice vote then? All in favor of the nomination of Karen Ebel to serve as chair, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Congratulations, Madam Chair.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. So, I guess there's a couple of things that we have to talk about, some more mundane, and that is how frequently we want to be meeting. But I guess, well, okay, we'll get the mundane stuff off first. But let's. So I thought about this. I don't know what other people think. Monthly meetings just seem like a lot. Quarterly meetings, I think, I think you lose continuity, when you go with a quarterly meeting. I guess I was sort of thinking maybe we could meet every other month. I don't know what other people think. And if we did that, if it was every other month, of course that would put us into the Christmas season, so I was thinking our next meeting might be sometime in the middle of December, and then we wouldn't meet again until like the end of February sometime. And I mean, I'd be interested to hear what Mr. Nork has to say. What I'm thinking that we'll be close, or maybe have the biennial plan by that. So there's two plans, just to be clear. There's a biennial plan. You can say.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead,
thanks for the clarification. I forgot all about the biennial solid waste report, which is something we're currently working on. It's supposed to come out every odd year, and it's essentially, so there's the solid waste management plan, which comes out every 10 years, and it's kind of a long-range general framework. The biennial report is supposed to be kind of an update every 2 years, so it's a check-in. It's a check-in maybe on the plan itself, but it could also be, it's specifically supposed to be focused on the waste reduction goal that's established in the Solid Waste Management Act, which HB 413 has just changed to a disposal reduction goal. It used to be basically a waste diversion goal, so diverting 40% of waste generated by the year 2000. It was really difficult for the department to measure that, to get the data necessary to figure out how much waste is actually generated in the state, how much is actually recycled, composted, that kind of stuff. So the new goal is now a disposal reduction goal, which is much easier for the department to track because there are only essentially 6 operating landfills in the state. They all report to us, and it's pretty definitive data. So it's just easier to track disposal over time than trying to track diversion and recycling, because there's a lot more moving parts with recycling because material is changing hands so often. It's really, sometimes you get gaps in data, but you also get double reporting or triple reporting because of multiple facilities reporting the same info. So we're hoping that this new goal will make it easier to track progress. And I kind of got off on a sidetrack, sorry. So the biennial report is supposed to be a check-in on that disposal reduction goal. So we're working on that. Hopefully that'll be out before the end of the year. I'm hopeful that we'll have that in November, so that's something that the group can look at if the next meeting is in December, we should have something available to look at in terms of that biennial report. So is that?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, basically, what I was just trying to get out there is that there's two planning things going on here. One is the biennial plan, and I'm really hopeful that the next time we meet, no pressure, that we have that plan, because that's a lot of data, and it would be good to have data to help inform our process here. So I look forward to having that. And then there's the long range planning process. Just in case you're curious, we did have a 6-year planning process, but it was the recommendation of quite a few people during the study committee process that it's just too short, especially with the biennial planning process. And so we wanted to do something on a 10-year basis, which is why we changed it from 6 to 10 years. So do we have consensus that every other month would make sense rather than monthly or quarterly? Okay. All right.
Excuse me, could I suggest that we do every other month, but as we get closer to a deadline, we might have to meet more frequently?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think we have to be a little bit flexible on, because I think as we're going to the long range plan, it's going to be more involved. And I guess I'm not suggesting this today, but it might be possible that we might end up having to do some study committees, because this is, I mean, it's not study committees, subcommittees, because this is such a huge process. And if we end up having to do that, then the every other month kind of thing would allow some more meetings to take place in between. So I mean, I don't know, I hate to start fooling around with, dates, but I guess I'm thinking the second week of December. Because it's a week before Christmas, not the first, so that's sort of where I am. I don't know if Friday mornings work for people.
So it'll be the 10th.
Yeah.
That's fine. I happen to have a second Friday of the month conflict Friday morning.
Do you? We could do, is it all morning? I mean, we could do the Thursday, I mean, we could do the 9th too, I suppose.
So the other thing I could suggest is we could do another
Do a doodle poll, that's fine.
Yeah, it would probably be more efficient for everyone.
I definitely think so. Okay, we'll do that, and then we'll sort of look towards the end of February, for our next meeting, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, could we possibly schedule
Sure.
maybe all through 2022, just get the dates, just knowing
We
how
can-
calendars fill up? That would be helpful.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll give it a shot. Okay.
As best we can, that'd be great.
Lynn, did you wanna say something?
Yeah, sorry, I put it in the chat box and was told just talk. So I'm wondering if you're anticipating that all the work will happen by the whole group, or are you anticipating any sort of subcommittees or smaller groups preparing things in between meetings?
I'm not sure I'm feeling one way or the other at this particular point. I think maybe in December, once we have the biennial plan, we can talk a little bit more about where we're going. But honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if we ended up trying to have some subcommittees to work on different areas to inform the group. I mean, that's sort of, I don't know what other people think, but it's a very sprawling topic. I mean, Representative Pearl.
Thank you. I would, just, if we're gonna try and do a 2022 entire calendar, we may have to be a little careful about working around the legislative schedule.
Yeah, I
for
agree. I
February.
mean, it may be a little tough. I mean, we wanna help people. As the senator and Mr. Pearl know, we basically have no lives. Things, I mean, things just get scheduled randomly, and that's why a lot of times Mondays and Fridays are better for us, because Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is tough. So for December, I mean, maybe we could do a Thursday, but all bets are off after that.
Well, I was gonna suggest Monday as an alternative.
As an alternative,
Because
yeah.
of the legislative schedule tends to be very busy Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Right, especially through March, so.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll do the doodle poll and we'll see what we come up with. So I can't remember, Mike, if you said this, but the administrative support as far as note-taking and things like that will be done by the department?
Yes, we will, our administrative support is subject to the will of the group here as well for additional matters, but what we envision is that we would provide a venue like this for meetings. If there's a decision that we want to hold the meetings elsewhere, we would help with coordinating that, but we certainly can provide a venue and support for hybrid meetings, and it's easiest for us to do that here in the building if that's possible. And we also would provide, minutes for meetings, at least have them prepared and ready for review by the group for the approval of the meeting. And if there are other administrative support functions, obviously for, compiling, the work of, subcommittees, if that happens, then, we would certainly provide any, sort of, logistical support for that, printing and handouts, agendas, that sort of thing. So we're at the group's disposal for those kinds of activities.
And then, just as far as public access to documents and such, I'm assuming that you're gonna have sort of a home for the working group and the documents and stuff on the DES website?
Yes, we can absolutely do that, and we look to the group's, desires as far as what that looks like, and how you'd like that done, but that's something we can certainly do.
Yeah, because it'll be important to have minutes and meetings.
I did just want to say that it's something we've already anticipated, and we're going to put a page on our website for that. And it'll be a repository for meeting minutes, any handouts that we have, other documents. So we'll have that.
Okay. Because it being a working group that's not really a legislative group but convened by DES, I'm not sure what's going to appear, just for the public that's here, I'm not sure what's going to appear on the general report website. I think we'll make sure that the notices go into the calendar, but the real home for this is going to end up being on the DES website, I think. So the other thing I wanted to add, and Representative Pearl is going to know better than I do. I mean, basically the legislature is not going to stand still. We're going to be doing our work, but there are a lot of bills being introduced. I meant to say this earlier, but if this issue wasn't already a hot issue in the state, the interest of Casella in opening up a landfill in Dalton has really increased the interest, I would say, statewide, and we have a lot of different bills coming in. You know, the legislature is going to do what the legislature is going to do, and I think that we just keep driving forward with our planning process. And you know, Representative Pearl, if you think that there is legislative matters that should be brought to the attention of the group, you know, that would be good. I think already there's quite a few bills that have been introduced. So I didn't know if you wanted to say a word, or if Senator Gray, you're on. The Senate hasn't started yet, so.
Well, I'll say this. There are quite a few LSRs that have been introduced. Currently, at this point, we can't really see what they are. So I'm only looking at titles, but I would say there's probably at least 10 that I haven't completely made it through the entire LSR list, because there was 847, I think it was, to start with. But there'll be some that aren't signed off on. There'll be some compilation that will occur as it goes through the process. But we'll have a complete number, I would say probably within a month or so, of what things look like. And there definitely are many in there by title that I assume will come to the Environment Act Committee. But you get surprised sometimes when you actually see the language of where they get assigned. So we'll have to kind of wait and see a little bit longer. But yeah, I would think by our next meeting in December, we definitely will have an idea of the bills that will be assigned and what we'll be looking at. Should be able to see the content by then.
Well, and I think Mr. North will be monitoring those and doing the DES input.
Yeah, I should clarify. I do that, and Mike Wimsett also has a big role in that as well.
Okay. All right.
And just to talk to the Senate's process, the Senate filing period did end on Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So what is filed, and they probably all should be in the index now. Again, as the representative said, all you'll have is the title so far, but the Senate also can file confidential bills, so that you won't see them in the index until they're actually introduced in the committee. Don't know of any of those yet, but just so that you understand the process that is out there.
Right. If I may, I did put an article on the Northeast Resource Recovery Association's website, which lists all of the dozen or so house LSRs that appear to be related to solid waste. Again, it's just titles right now, but if anyone wants to see a list of just the ones that seem to be related to solid waste, that's available on our website at nrra.recycles.org under our news section.
Well, I just wanted to mention that because I think we have to keep one eye on what's going on in the legislature as well. And the way that process works, the legislature wraps up its work in June, and then it's up to the governor whether he signs whatever comes out or not. So we'll know by that framework, basically, what else is coming down the pike that would inform this process. So at this point, I just really wanted to throw it open to the group. We did all introduce ourselves and what our interests are, but I really like to give everybody an opportunity to say a little bit more about their respective industry, what they would hope to get out of the group, and just share whatever you want to share. And if you don't want to share anything, you don't have to, but I think in order for us to get to know each other and where we're coming from a little bit better, anybody who wants to speak, we'd love to hear from you. So.
So I'll start.
Okay.
So from my perspective, I've been working in solid waste for over 15 years. Used to work for the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. And from my perspective at the City of Concord, I'm interested in two things primarily: disposal capacity and the recycling markets. We're coming to the end of a 10-year contract, and we're going to face some challenges with the economics of that contract adjustment. So really I come to the group from that perspective, looking out for the taxpayer.
What has Concord done that's been particularly innovative?
So we have a pay-as-you-throw bag program, which finances about half the solid waste operations in the state, and then we have a single-stream recycling program.
Mark Morgan. For me, the planning piece is a big part of what I'm interested in. I used to work here at DES in the planning group, and since that group has been disbanded, I think New Hampshire has really hit the pause button as far as what are we doing next. I do operate, the City of Lebanon operates a landfill, so having a better understanding of what the future is helps us as a municipality plan for those disposal needs. So it'll be interesting to see how we spell out and define future needs of the state of New Hampshire.
Anybody else?
Yeah. I'll speak. Brian Patno, Town of Lancaster, as not only a rural community but also one of the only representatives from way up north. You know, the areas I see at least is the C&D recycling in the North Country is a big issue. For an example, Lancaster this year, population about 3,000 people, we're going to be doing like 900 tons of C&D that goes right to the landfill. I'd like eventually to see a C&D recycling facility up north. The other thing I would love to see is food composting, so I'm really interested in the changes there that, you know, that
Steve Bodger, the waste management. Just for the group, I think what would be important is, I know that from a disposal standpoint, issues like C&D, food composting, those are all great initiatives, and I think moving in that direction is very important. But I would just caution the group to say that before we ban things, to make sure that we've got a pathway to develop facilities that can handle it. I work in other states, and there's sometimes an initiative to ban something, and then hopefully the market responds. We've seen some challenges in Massachusetts in that regard. So we just need to think as a group, if we do something like ban C&D, that we support C&D recycling in the state, so that, you know, they can succeed and we have an outlet. We don't have no place for us to go. Same thing with food. So it's kind of a high level thing, but I think it's something that we just need to keep in mind to make sure we can respond to the things that come out of it.
So, Steve, I don't know if everybody knows, if you could talk a little bit more about waste management, the landfill you operate in the state, anything else you want to say about the state operations?
Yeah.
And MRF.
Sure. Waste management operates the turnkey recycling environmental enterprise facility. It's in Rochester, New York. We have we've got one in New York too. I was on the phone all this morning on our Hikers facility in New Hampshire, and we have site life until 2034 at that facility. We got a permit from the DES. It was challenged, went to the state Supreme Court. They upheld the Waste Management Council's decision. The air permit was also brought to the state Supreme Court. It was denied, so we are free and clear from a permitting standpoint. We're under construction. We are looking at starting that new facility cell operation probably the end of 2023. All things are moving in the direction that's going. So, fair amount of capacity available at that facility. That being said, you know, we know there's interest to expand recycling. We've got a MRF that is in the footprint of the new landfill we're removing. We public roadway. We're moving the MRF. We're starting construction. We're actually been working on construction of that MRF.
Wait, where?
There.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's going to be a little different than what was there before. A little larger, a little more suitable to what is happening in New Hampshire from a recycling standpoint. So that's underway, and that's been permitted and is under construction as we speak right now as well. So, but Waste Management has got a project with the University of New Hampshire where we're removing landfill gas, and we're putting it in a dedicated pipeline that goes to Durham, and that provides heat, air conditioning, and electric power supply for the entire UNH campus. That's been going on for 11 years, and that's been a successful project. We're generating more gas, and that we're using that gas for electric production at that facility. And that's been going on since 1998, the most recent trip. So a lot of things that are going on at that facility, and it's a pretty significant operation supporting the state of New Hampshire.
Another disclosure time. I do represent Rochester in my Senate district. I'm also the city councilman on the Rochester City Council. So, you know, we're the ones that process after the leachate is processed initially on the facility. You know, we have the facility that processes it the rest of the way. Again, trying to make sure that you guys know, you know, who I represent and how I represent them. So.
I think Duncan Watson, I'm with the City of Keene as the Assistant Public Works Director, and I think I figured out why I'm here. It says under page 2, item 12, any other, and other members the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Services deems necessary. Now, I would hardly say that I'm necessary, but I hope I can find myself useful. I have 30 years in this industry. I started off as the solid waste coordinator for the City of Keene back in 1992. I was a board member of the Northeast Resource Recovery Association for somewhere over 2 decades, the president of the Board of Trustees for about 13 years. I'm on the Waste Management Council currently. And on its face, we don't really have a problem in New Hampshire for disposal. We can get rid of anything you want to get rid of today as you want. And I remember that report coming out of 40% diversion back in the early 90s, and you know the goal was that by 2000 we would have 40% diversion. And the effective problem is that we don't really have the infrastructure to make that happen. Now I see that there's a lot of interests at the table, and that's good because you know together people can help solve these problems. But if we're I don't think waste bans are ways to go. I don't know that extended producer responsibility is always the way to go. I think we need a mindset change of looking at these things that we're disposing of in ways that are effective, but not necessarily best practice or best for all kinds of things, whether it's energy conservation, climate change impacts, whatnot. There are solutions out there. The question is whether we have the political will and the consensus to be able to get to those solutions. I don't think that we're looking to recreate the wheel. I think that we're just going to need to talk through our process here to see if we can combine our interests into the direction that can solve these issues.
Thank you. I'm here just like you're here. I don't fill a slot, so in the same club. Anyways, anybody else?
I guess I would just say, just very quickly, so again, Coca-Cola, here representing the beverage industry in general. And we, of course, have an interest in ensuring that our containers are recycled properly. They're made to be remade. And we don't want to see them end up in landfills any more than anybody else does. So, we want to make sure that consumers are educated properly on how to recycle our containers. They're easily recyclable. They're, high value in that waste stream as well with aluminum and PET. And, yeah, that's about it. Just wanted to say that.
I'll just share that the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, we are a nonprofit, and our mission is to help communities reduce their waste, primarily through recycling in both an environmentally sound way and also in a financially sustainable way. And so, I echo a lot of the things that have been brought up in terms of
diversion in the state, and I think there's some low-hanging fruit where we can do it in a way that's also going to help save taxpayer money, and that's kind of the sweet spot that I'm hoping we can focus on, is where can we meet both of those needs.
Would you like to comment a little bit on how recycling is going in the state?
Sure, yes. If people haven't heard, recycling markets have been doing great recently. So you might have heard in recent years, after China's national sword policy was implemented, that had a really negative impact on recycling markets. And many communities were feeling negative financial implications from that. So communities with single or dual stream recycling largely saw their costs of recycling increase, sometimes dramatically. And communities that rely on fully sourced separation and selling their recyclables themselves, they saw quite a bit reduction in the revenue that they got from those sales. But in part due to the pandemic, we've actually seen a rebound in recycling markets sort of across the board. So the value of cardboard over a year ago is up. The value of basically everything is up. Interestingly, what we saw for residential communities is that during the pandemic, when businesses and schools shut down, all of the material that would have been generated in those institutions started being generated at home. So communities across New Hampshire have been flooded with an increase in recyclables, in trash, in construction and demolition debris as everyone stayed home and started clearing out their basements and then renovating their houses to be more comfortable to stay at home during the pandemic. So the good news is that communities are starting to see either lower costs for their single and dual stream recycling or greater revenue from their source separated recycling. But communities are also facing the challenges of staffing limitations right now, and also just the additional amount of volume coming through. But the good news is recycling is definitely on the rebound.
Eric, I don't want to put you on the spot, but a lot of people don't. I certainly didn't know what the Waste Management Council was. Could you just describe a little more detail what that's all about?
So the Waste Management Council is one of 4 councils that I think is more of a check on DES. There's one for wetlands, there's water, the waste, and Bear, thank you. So the councils are set up where there's different representatives from different agencies and industries, I think, to kind of like how this is set up. So there's various public elected officials or city officials or town officials. Again, I represent professional engineers. There's a representative from UNH and so on. And our role is we hear from the DES, the director, on our at least quarterly meetings of what's going on. Ask questions. We get a chance to see the new rules ahead of schedule. Well, it's part of our schedule to see them before they're out in the public and opine on them early on, like we did with the compost rules last week. We also get to hear appeals to permits that the Waste Bureau puts out. So I'm going to take a line from the Senator for full disclosure. My firm works for many of the solid waste entities in the state. Some of them are sitting at this table. So I don't get to sit on any of the fun stuff of the appeals because of the conflict. I don't think I'm conflict on anything here. I think I bring a perspective of working for clients and what their interests are in the solid waste and how it affects them, and to guide them on how rules should be followed and how to best help their operations. So that's, a little bit about me and about what the council does.
Yeah, I mean that. So one of the things that evolved during the study committee process was that one of the responsibilities of the Waste Management Council was also to help with planning for DES. But your quarterly meetings and you're so busy on appeals and everything else that you're doing, the planning piece really there hasn't been a lot of Waste Management Council to get involved, and of course they're all volunteers. So that's why another good reason to have the working group that we have, and then have a member of the Waste Management Council represented on the working group. So we just put those pieces together. So Lynn, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're our regional representative. I wondered if you wanted to share anything.
Sure. I was just going to say that I really think it's probably the regional aspect, so that as you work on planning and other things, I do have either a handle or the ability to get a handle on what's happening in a lot of states within our region and outside the region. And just in my life, I've participated in the development of a lot of solid waste and recycling related plans. And so that's an area that I have a personal strength and can bring to. But I feel that what NERC really can contribute or anticipates contributing is being able to provide information and perspective of those outside of New Hampshire.
And is it a correct characterization to say a lot of states have done a lot of pretty aggressive planning in the area in solid waste generally?
And certainly in the last few months, in fact last week, we've seen some new plans come out. Massachusetts just released their new plan, very aggressive. So we are seeing it, and we're seeing more of a connection being made to climate. I know that was mentioned at the beginning, but that's something that we're seeing much more strongly, is a very clear narrative and set of initiatives tied to that, as well as trying to expand the scope of materials, let's talk the non-traditional ones, to things that are being banned from disposal. So you may have noticed that last week, for example, Massachusetts, I think it was last week, Massachusetts released their new solid waste master plan, and it incorporates and anticipated, but bans that will go into effect 1 year from now on textile disposal, period, like all textiles, mattresses, and lowering the threshold for requiring organics to be composted. By threshold, I mean how much do you produce in a month? So right now, at their ton, they're lowering it to half a ton. It doesn't apply to individuals as it does in Vermont. It's a business institution requirement. And New York has done similar things. Connecticut has been being very aggressive recently. So we're seeing a lot of renewed attention, which I think was alluded to earlier, but with that aggression. Not just like sitting back and saying, okay, we're going to do this stuff that we've talked about for a long, long time, but have never just had the political support to do.
Thank you. Is there anything anybody else wanted to share? Did you want to say
I'll
something?
speak to kind of tying up what Steve was talking about, the bans. We want to prevent recyclable materials from going to waste energy facilities or a landfill, but putting these solid waste master plans together is good to map out what we want to do, but I think what's lacking in the Massachusetts approach is really to foster how you get there. The political needs, the political will to permit new facilities, to site new sites. It's very difficult to get there if you can't build a facility. It's got to go somewhere. Somebody has to put the money up to create this facility and to site it. And if the permitting process is open-ended and there's no sort of stepwise approach to go from an idea to a facility, people aren't putting the money into something that's not a sure thing. It's really going to be difficult to do.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the waste to energy issue, just what's happening in New Hampshire and generally?
Well, we used to have two facilities in New Hampshire. One in Claremont closed down in 2013. We have our facility in Concord. It processes about 500 tons a day of post-recycled waste. It produces about 12 to 13 megawatts of power. On the back end of the process, we remove ferrous and non-ferrous metal from the ash after it goes through the combustion process. So last year we did about 130 tons of non-ferrous aluminum, brass, those sorts of items, and about Pennsylvania, New York, Portsmouth, Virginia, and then South Broward, Florida. We collect, or we receive, post-recycled waste and create power and reduce the volume going to the landfill. And there's other things that you could do with the ash. There's been some beneficial reuse projects that have been done over the years that kind of haven't really gone anywhere, but it does have a beneficial reuse depending on the market. So things can be done with the ash versus just landfilling it. Also, that was the wheelabrator model. Now we're Wind Waste Innovations. We're expanding into construction, demolition, debris processing. We have rail transfer operations in the Northeast that transfer to our landfills in Ohio. So it's quite a, we're a curb to grid organization, as they say, and we do waste collection and we do the waste energy process. So we do a little bit of everything.
Anybody else?
Well, I guess UNH, US University Systems, come up a few times. So I'm an environmental engineer, and what I hope to bring to the group is, having spent 35 years looking at data and teaching young people how to design landfills and MRFs and whatnot, and then on the other side, what we all know, we've all known this forever, that it's a societal issue, right? The way a lot of people learn to recycle is they were embarrassed by their children into it because their children learn K through 12. So UNH tries to look at the triple bottom line using things like life cycle assessment to say, this is feasible, this isn't. Being an engineer, I'm very focused on the economics and the application side. We've tried a number of endeavors called zero waste, including the new football stadium, and we quickly run smack dab into the composting issues that you've been talking about. How do you compost certain plastics? So I'm a nerd, and I'm here mainly as a technical person. I can bring you the international latest research, the state and nation research, and the thing I would be absolutely dreadful at would be the politics. So I will I will listen a lot and learn a lot on that, I hope. But I'm very happy to be here.
A lot of politicians are dreadful at politics too.
Could be.
But we love the data. Well, thanks for coming. Anybody else want to share anything? Do you want to say anything about hospitals?
Some of our obstacles really are around staffing, and B, around logistics. You have a fixed site, sorting things, you become landlocked in your own space. Processes, pre-consumer, post-consumer. There's some infection control practices that need to be considered if you're going to start talking about, pre-consumer food waste and post-consumer food waste. So there's lots of other aspects that would need to be thought through in that planning process, and how logistically it could or couldn't be implemented. So it's really just about process flow and how things work into the habits of the workforce.
Well, this bill was developed during COVID times, and we learned a lot. Like Mark runs the facility that takes a lot of Dartmouth-Hitchcock's medical waste, and we learned, it's a very particularized type of waste, and I don't want to misquote it, but I think, was it like 12 tons a day? I mean, it was some enormous amount of tonnage a day going into the Lebanon landfill, and it seemed like that was a topic that was worth discussing.
So just to jump on the COVID concept as it relates to healthcare, for us, we met with staff and we receive 12 tons a day from GHMC 6 days a week. They're a 24/7 operation, as you're aware. So they're a regular customer. When COVID came out and I met with staff and I met with our emergency coordinators, my concern was actually not the hospital, it was everybody else. The hospitals are extremely skilled at monitoring and maintaining those systems. My concern was Joe Blow at home that might or might not be vaccinated and or infected, and how is that making its way through the system, and how is my staff managing that? So it's, for us, the hospitals are, you know what can it's coming in, you know how it's being processed. DHMC autoclaves some of their low-level infectious waste and then ships the rest off. So for us, that was an easy one. It was everybody else that was a little unnerving.
So I'm going through my mind all the things that I learned part of our study committee process. So there are private land, and I know members of the public are really interested in this topic. So there are private landfills like what Waste Management runs, and then we have public landfills, which is the slot that Mark is filling. So if you could just talk a little bit about the solid waste district that you're involved with. I mean, it does cover Vermont and New Hampshire, right? And then like Nashua has its own, and the public landfills don't have quite the same restrictions as far as out-of-state trash and things like that private landfills do. They're a little bit, but if you want to just talk about the world of solid waste districts, I think that would be helpful.
So the City of Lebanon Landfill, as was mentioned, is a publicly owned and operated solid waste facility. We serve 90,000 people at that landfill, bridging the Connecticut River. We have 11 communities in Vermont. The remainder are from New Hampshire. Our service area spans from the town of Sutton, New Hampshire, over to West Fairleigh, Vermont, south to Plainfield, north to Orford. So it sounds like an impressive space, but anybody who's aware of those towns, some of them are 150 people. So we have a large service area with, in some cases, very limited solid waste services. So COVID had a huge impact on our services to the public. Some communities shut their facilities down, and as a response, our customer traffic has gone up 100% in the last 18 months. People, as was mentioned earlier, cleaning out, wondered where can I bring this? Lebanon's open 6 days a week. We're the most convenient, and it's where people go grocery shopping. So combining trips, they come to Lebanon. It's important to note some of the differences that exist between private and public. I mean, it's not about right or wrong, good or bad. It's two very different models. The City of Lebanon is permitted as a limited service area, even though we have a larger service area than, say, City of Nashua, who is just City of Nashua, serving a similar population density. Not density, but population number. So our model is to make the whole last as long as possible and to maximize disposal capacity for as long as possible. It's not that others are doing something different, it's just we serve a different customer. We serve all of those people. We are not a solid waste district. The City of Lebanon owns the landfill, and we essentially, and we just did this recently, we renewed our contracts with 23 towns. So we operate under a series of memorandum of understanding, and we hold informally quarterly meetings with our customers. They're not district towns, so the vote or decision about the direction of the Lebanon landfill is borne on the shoulders of the Lebanon City Council. So Lebanon City Council can decide the fate of that facility at any moment. It's not a decision that's made amongst the towns, although Lebanon does reach out, but just organizationally it's the responsibility of the City of Lebanon. So it's just a different structure. We're not a district, but we do serve multiple towns. I work with all of those towns because our contracts include waste reduction requirements and a series of other requirements. So because we're maintaining that capacity, we want to ensure that it's lasting as long as possible.
I thought you were a solid waste
No.
district. Well, maybe Mark can just Mike can describe what they are. If you could, you are composting at your facility.
So we've been composting at our site for 15 years, I think. And full disclosure, we did skirt the rules with a technicality by physically composting on the footprint of the landfill. So we received MSW and managed it differently within the footprint of the landfill. So didn't operate with a permit for 14 of those 15 years, because technically it was being received in the landfill. Our permit requires us to put topsoil or equivalent onto inactive areas within 90 days. So instead of purchasing topsoil, we manufactured it ourselves. It was placed on the landfill on outside slopes. So technically it never left the landfill. But we were removing organics from the waste mass and not importing topsoil from off-site. Topsoil, for anybody who's trying to buy dirt, is a pretty valuable commodity. So we manufacture about 20,000 yards a year of compost at the Lebanon facility. We started with Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and Dartmouth College. So we were doing about 1,000 tons a year of food scraps with those two customers. Just recently, we did a pilot with 35 households in the Upper Valley with a variety of demographics and determined that about 15% of what we're receiving in Lebanon is food scraps. So identified that as the highest potential waste diversion opportunity for the landfill outside of paper and regular recyclables. But that was the next big item on the ticket. So in January or February, we started offering a drop-off program that we charge our residents. We now have close to 200 households that deliver food scraps to us on a weekly basis. We also have in the Upper Valley a company that picks up food scraps at the curb that brings it to our facility. So we're doing between 2,000 and 3,000 tons a year of food scrap diversion out of our facility. And again, the food scraps that we're composting never leaves the site. We're using it on site instead of importing virgin soil products. We are actually in the process of getting a permit, and so we can be legit. And it's just, we've been approached by a number of communities. What we're trying to do is focus on our core communities as far as what's available. There have been impacts with the state of Vermont's food scrap ban. Initially, Vermont's ban would not allow us as a authorized compost facility, the way the rules were written. We worked with the state of Vermont and had that changed, so we're now an authorized facility. There was a mileage requirement for Vermont composters. We got that straightened out. We do take some food scraps from the state of Vermont. Casella delivers some food scraps to us. We take everything. We do compostable products, meat, dairy, chocolate cake, whatever. And for us, what we did early on was we identified two separate markets. There's a market where everybody wants to grow tomatoes and have beautiful compost, and then there's DOT projects, low value compost products. And there were very few composters out there looking at that end use, low value product. The low value product allows you to compost a variety of things and accept a higher rate of contamination that just works. We decided to go with this lower value end product and diverted an enormous amount more as a result. Easier for the customer. We require for our food scrap program that all food scraps be delivered in BPI certified compostable bags to help with odor control and vectors, and it doesn't freeze in the dumpster is the other benefit. And we require BPI certification on the bags because BPI vets their products, and it includes a PFAS elimination in that certification. So we work very closely with our customers. Recently, Hypotherm, a large employer in the Upper Valley, has gone to food scrap diversion in their 2 cafeterias. We met with Hypotherm and told them about the BPI requirement. They changed their utensils to that. The city 4 years ago, through their farmers market program, kind of isolated the products and set up contracts with all the farmer vendors where they to buy compostable products from us. We pick up so we sell the compostable products, we pick up the compostable products and compost them. So we enjoy a 90% diversion at our farmers markets through these programs. So it's really, it's been a very multi-pronged approach in inserting food scrap diversion within the community.
Mark,
sure.
What are you using it as daily cover, or are you using it for areas in landfill that you're sort of you're covering?
So it's not daily cover. It's areas that are not actively being filled within 90 days. We're required to vegetate. So it's outside slopes. It's areas that are just kind of laying dormant until we reopen it and apply, bury more trash.
So I mean, I wanted to just make a comment about that. I mean, if I was in Mark's position, which I was at one point running a landfill for 7 years for the city of Keene, I would have done exactly what he was doing. Because daily cover is extremely expensive, and obtaining the cover materials required for the requirements are, in fact, difficult to obtain, and they're expensive. They're a huge part of operation costs. In fact, if you were to mine a landfill today, an older landfill, you'd probably recover a third of the material as daily cover, or cover materials that were required to establish vegetation. But at the end of the day, is that really truly the highest and best use of a composting type of situation? I would argue that, as I said, I'm not criticizing what you're doing. I would do exactly what you're doing. But at the end of the day, that food waste, all of that energy in the food waste, all that compost product is being buried in a landfill. And I just don't think that's the best way to do something like that. Given that, I would do exactly what he's doing right now, given what's happening. But I'm just saying, I think that, I'm hoping that this committee can somehow find its way to think a little bit outside of the box. Because, if we think that, I heard Reagan mention earlier that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. And there probably is, but I don't really think we're going to educate our way out of this issue. I don't think that, I think it really comes down to what the gentleman from Wind Waste mentioned before, that there's got to be infrastructure for this. And if we're not talking about, ultimately finding a way to create the infrastructure to do what it is that we want to do, and we have to basically say what it is that we want. It says here in the legislation, you want X by X date. If you say that, then you have to turn it over and say, okay, private sector, public sector, how do we work together to make this work? And I think it is achievable, but to think that we're not going to be having to make some difficult decisions about what kind of infrastructure gets put into place, making decisions about whether or not compost, using it as cover material, which is eventually going to be covered up with trash later on, is our best option. I would argue it's not.
Well, I mean, that's exactly why we're all here, to
Yep.
be innovative, and I mean, another thing that we learned through all of this is just a healthy respect for the people that deal with all the waste that we're all generating. I mean, there's a lot to manage. And just as far as composting, it really was a big issue in our committee, and it is low-hanging fruit, and I don't want to misquote the statistics, but my understanding is something like 20 to 25% in weight of what's going into the landfills is food waste. I mean, we can quibble about the percentage, but if we can do more composting, which is all the reason why we wanted to get these regs going, so more people, more towns. I mean, we had a lot of interest from farmers. They have land that they want to be able to do some composting on as a augmentation to their funding stream, and they were really frustrated, so we hoped that it would help agriculture as well. So I guess there's just a few other things. Mike, if you could just describe what a solid waste district is. So I just want to try to make somewhat level the playing fields here. And then the other thing is just I want us to be aware of what New Hampshire's solid waste disposal hierarchy is. So landfilling is right now the least desirable in our, I mean, if you just want to go through that.
Sarah, could you go to the website and bring up the hierarchy? I think it's on the DES solid waste homepage, or on the waste reduction page. While Tara is doing that, so waste districts are not very prevalent in New Hampshire. If you look at some of our neighboring states like Vermont, it's there's a very well-established system of waste districts, which kind of creates a different paradigm for how waste is managed. It's more of a regional thing, whereas in New Hampshire, a lot of towns are doing it individually because there are a few waste districts, but there just aren't a lot. So I think there used to be a requirement, and Mark, you may know this a little bit better than me, there used to be a requirement that communities in New Hampshire form waste districts. And that was actually in the statute, and there were rules that the department had about approving plans for those waste districts.
And then the district, those towns who didn't want to be a part of a district came back to the state and said, we'd like to form single town districts. And that's what happened, and away went the district model for New Hampshire. So Mike's right, there was a history of districts, but it quickly just did not go well, and then went the other direction. So towns formed single town districts.
Right.
So, like, isn't Mount Carberry a district?
So Mount Carberry is a district. That's the Androscoggin Valley Regional Refuse Disposal District, or AVRD. There's the BCEP Solid Waste District, which is Barnstead, Chichester, Epsom, Pittsfield. That's where the BCEP comes from. There are some other districts like the Pemmy Baker District, which I believe, and there's the Souhegan Regional District in like the Amherst area. Some of the districts don't really function as they don't like operate a facility, but they may function in a way that facilitates waste management contracts for their region. Eric, did you have a comment? I just saw you.
No.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you had any additional insight on that. Tara, did you have?
Apparently the solid waste website on DES website is unavailable. I've tried 3 different browsers,
Okay.
so give me a minute.
That's okay.
Shocker,
Maybe
shocked
it's a blocked site on our computer.
Push the button, right?
Or you just generalize.
So in general, the waste management hierarchy is similar to what you've probably all seen from the EPA. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with New Hampshire's waste management hierarchy. It's basically a standard of preference for different methods of managing waste. And with any hierarchy, with any waste management hierarchy, whether it's the EPA or New Hampshire, source reduction is at the top. Source reduction is basically waste prevention. So don't make the waste so then you don't have to manage it. Below that would be recycling. So if you have a waste and it needs to be managed, it would be preferable to recycle it versus disposing of it. Composting falls just below recycling. And then, if I recall correctly, I believe it's waste to energy or energy recovery would be the next tier under composting. And then incineration without energy recovery.
Right.
Thanks, Duncan. And the lowest tier on the hierarchy is landfilling. So that's kind of the standard of preference. It's something that New Hampshire has had since the late 80s when the statute was implemented.
Can I comment on the district? I didn't want to interrupt you.
Almost set.
The rules require, and on the application forms for various permits, that the applicant has to contact the solid waste district. So on the website, if you could ever find it, is a list of districts that you'd have to contact about the applicants. They have to be notified of permits. How they function is different. Like Mark was saying, some are kind of less administrative, and they just acknowledge that their application is in, and some are more active, like AVRD. So it's not a consistent system.
Oh, there it is. So I pulled up a SWOT presentation.
Well, I just thought it was important for us to see it because when we're talking about disposal reduction goals, that's sort of what our hierarchy is that we're going to be looking at and working with. And right now, I would say an awful lot of our waste does go into landfills, so we're going to try to figure out other alternatives so we can make good use of things that are otherwise going into the landfills.
Okay, I'm sorry, just one question. Where would anaerobic digesting fit onto that hierarchy?
Probably in waste to energy.
So I guess, the only other fact, yeah, go ahead.
Talk about composting and animal digestion. We operate a facility in Charlestown, Mass. that handles permitted for 250 tons a day of organic waste. We handle about 100 tons a day now of source separated material, and about 110 tons a day of liquid material that comes in. We go through a process where we depackage that material, and then we put it through a macerator, which is in essence a large industrial blender, is one way to put it. Then we truck it up to the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. They built a separate anaerobic digester for that. They were generating about 400,000 cubic feet per day of biogas for this project. They're now generating about 1 million cubic feet per day of biogas, and they're basically providing power to that entire facility at Greater Lawrence and major pump stations. So they're self-sufficient, and they're looking at additional capacity that will allow them to export. So that's another way to manage organic waste. We service colleges, grocers, hospitals, large generators, and that was put in place getting to the point of waste bans in Massachusetts. They put a waste ban in place to require diversion for those generators that produce a ton per week or more, and that's where those large generators came from. It's now going to be reduced to half a ton, so a lot more folks are going to come into that fold. But that project operated for about 2.5 years before we got to the capacity that we're at, so it took a long time to get it up and going. We built it in response to this regulatory requirement that we thought would flip the switch and things would suddenly go there, and that took quite a bit of time to get there. But it is working. It's been effective. It was just we had a ribbon cutting, if that's the word, at Greater Lawrence with the state and with the commissioner and others basically acknowledging it. I will tell you, it's not a cheap operation. I mean, the Greater Lawrence, I think they put $35 to $38 million into that anaerobic digester. Most of it was through grants, all of it grants, but it's an option that's out there, aside from what Mark talked about. So. But to Duncan's point, you can continue that conversation. What happens with the material that goes in the anaerobic digester when it's done, right? So, but there's value being brought out of digesting it, reducing power, and reducing volume. So, those are values.
Lynn has something that she'd like to add, so Lynn, I'm unmuting you.
Thank you. So I want to be sure, audio is not perfect, that when the answer to the question of anaerobic digestion is waste to energy, was that what the answer was?
Yes.
And why? That would not have been my intuition on that.
Because you're primarily deriving energy from a waste mass.
Yes, but there are many anaerobic digesters in the region that what happens with the digestate is that they make compost and they're making finished product in addition to producing energy.
And that's true. Yep. But I think that given the hierarchy we have, that would be the best category. It's a waste to energy facility doesn't have to be incineration. It can be pyrolysis. It can be something that produces energy in addition to other products as well. But that's kind of the hierarchy we have. So that's was my initial response.
Right. So I guess and apologies, I'm just not hearing perfectly. So is this set by law? So the interpretation of anaerobic digestion would be under waste energy. Is that set by law? Is the definition of composting established by law?
No.
That was just his best guess at where it would
Okay.
fit.
So I think it would be worth at least considering if there is an opportunity to include anaerobic digestion under composting if they are in fact making a finished compost product. How's that sound?
I'm not actually familiar with any anaerobic digestion process that makes a finished compost.
Well, we have this a biopower in Connecticut there, and Vanguard Renewables does in Massachusetts.
What do you do at Waste Management? What's your product?
For this project I just discussed, that material is managed by Reagan Lawrence, and I think they landfill. We don't take it. I think that's where it goes.
We usually view it as a pre-treatment step, right? Deer Island, Boston is probably one of the most successful, right? The anaerobic digester.
That's a different, yeah, so I'm referring to when you have food, not wastewater facility, but when the feedstock is food.
So
when we have anaerobic digesters in the region, that the feedstock is food.
absolutely, but the anaerobic sludge from food or sewage, nobody uses directly in compost. It's pre-treatment, then they either pelletize it or stabilize it or make it something that we can then compost. That's usually how it goes. Just wanted to, not trying to disagree with you.
There are different technologies and different approaches to it, and that it would be, I think, Lynn's saying, worth considering these nuances.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Well, when we're in our plan. So, is there anything anybody else wanted to say?
One
Sure.
point, if there's of interest, you mentioned National Sword, and then we see markets have rebounded, so everybody thinks there's great things. But I will tell you that there are other countries that products go to where the definitions in the product makeup is changing as we speak. If there is of interest to get a report on some of those changes and the volume changes over the last, say, 2 or 3 years, I could certainly facilitate someone to give an explanation on that, because what is currently exported for use today is probably going to be vastly different next year and the year after that. So again, if you wanted someone to give a presentation on that, I would offer that up.
I think that would be useful information. If it's not the next meeting, then, I mean, we'll sort of figure out the agenda, but that would be really helpful. Anybody else want to share anything?
Just have 2 quick things. I think any one of these, we want to look at them as several things, right? Most of the compost facilities around the country that didn't succeed is because they couldn't find a market. So I'm very sympathetic that compost, we love to have it be type A and go back into the food chain, but you know what I mean? We want to have many possibilities for the compost to be used. And then I think as Mark was talking, I was wondering if it was going to come up, since we have a 10-year charge, contaminants of emerging concern. PFAS is on the radar right now, but there'll always be others. I think we're going to have to say something about that. Leaching from compost, etc. So I just wanted to throw those on the table.
Well, and I know at your facility, you said you synthesize that and make cakes.
Sort of.
Sort of. Osmosis.
Yeah, actually, we have a advanced wastewater treatment plant at Turnkey with reverse osmosis, and that material that goes through that goes on to the wastewater plant in Rochester. That pulls out the PFAS contaminants. The material that's held back, we are now been piloting for the last year a system with ion exchange, and the results that we're getting from that material that doesn't go to Rochester, goes to another wastewater plant, has dropped considerably. Not quite to drinking water, but approaching it. So it's working effectively. So there are treatment capabilities that are out there, but they're not widely used, they're not cheap, but they're out there. So, but I agree with you.
Yeah, we just got to have it on the radar screen. Yeah.
Concerns, because the waste that we're generating, stuff that we take in, that we produce, where you know, Vortex jackets, you name it, has all the stuff on it. So it's problem.
Okay, well, I guess one thing I just want to put out there that's of great interest, I know all over the state, is plastics. We haven't even talked that much about plastics, but that's something that we're really going to be wrestling with. 2 things that always strike a chord that I assuming everybody here knows, I mean, I just don't know who's watching and who's not. Commerce Clause bars an individual state from banning out-of-state trash. So anything that's developed within in the state, it can't like single out other state trash. So I know it's been a big issue in our capacity concerns and things like that. The other thing is that local regulations control. So if somebody wants to put in a new landfill, really up to the town, or wants to expand a light landfill, it's up to the town to decide whether or not they want that to happen. So those are just a couple of sort of legal ramifications that we always have to keep our eye on. And other than that, that's really all that I have to say. I don't know if anybody else wants to share anything. We're really excited to have each of you here at the table, and you bring special expertise, and I think we just all have to, I think this was really useful just to get the conversation going, get to know where our different expertises lie, and I hope we can do some really good work. This really is just, it's going to be a little hard, I think, to wrap our minds around it and get direction, but if we start with some good data and you and Mike's able to get his biennial plan going, you know, we'll figure it out. I have confidence, but we want to be organized and have our meetings useful. So anyways, with that, unless anybody else